Okay, we have a sub question from Woofo Art. He's asking what are good shapes and what makes Leyendecker great with them. That's technically two questions separate from one another, so I'll put those two questions into one. And the first thing you do is, someone actually in the chat asked, Panda asked, what's a shape? So let's get that off the table here. Let me grab a contrasting color. No, yellow, no, blue. All right, so technically a shape, or a shape is the silhouette or the outline of an area, so to speak. In very simpler terms, you can focus on big shapes, medium shapes, or small shapes. Generally, it's good to separate those three. So for example, when you look at the grandma here, her biggest shapes that we would be looking at would technically be like this whole area here for the head, the silhouette of the head, right? All the way here. There you go. That's one shape. And then another shape would be like the whole. You can subdivide these as much as you want, by the way. There's no specific rule to it. It's whatever makes you easier to see a shape. All right, so I would probably subdivide this whole thing simply. There you go. And then we can have a third one where there seems to be a pretty big contrast here. This is not contrasty at all. Let's make it darker. There you go. Right there. Where the right under there. All right, now we can go and keep going, subdividing these further and further into smaller shapes, as many as you want. So for example, a medium shape or medium shapes I would consider would be like, for example, the outline of the hair versus the face. You could have the for example, the cheeks here. These are all like some, oh, whoops, my color dodge is on. There you go. This could be some considered some medium shapes along with the nose, right? Let's do that. There you go. And then I don't know, I guess the eyes, not the eyes, the eyeballs, but the eye sockets would be, I would consider it as medium shapes too. And anything within those medium shapes would be small shapes, aka details, right? So for example, here on the clothing would be recognizing this is key to, when looking at an image, you know exactly what makes it great and what makes it not, just by comparing, right? But for example, this would be another shape here. Obviously the arms, how could I forget about the arms? There you go, the whole thing, right? So and here too, right? Medium shape. So you just keep looking for big areas, big areas of silhouette, and then you subdivide that further and further down as many times as you want. I personally would recommend just big, medium, small to keep things simple, and you know, like you're able to recognize what you see easier. So now that we have that all out of the way, what makes Leyendecker shapes great? Now, these, I need to say that it's up to your interpretation. It's sort of like discussing psychology. You know, everyone has their own opinion. So what I'm about to say is mostly my opinion with a splash of just educated, like just my experience to things, right? So one thing that makes it great is the exaggeration of the proportions of a character, of each character. So here, honestly, this is a question that I don't really need to draw or paint, because it's all about recognizing. This question is more about recognizing than actually you know, how did he draw it, right? So for example, I would go as far as saying that I'm trying to see a contrasty color, man. I guess blue is the only one here. When he draws like a chin, when he draws like the shape of the head, when you look at it, it's like a stretched, simplified shape. It's not, he doesn't go too much into detail. Oops, sorry. This I would actually even like consider it. So here's what I personally think makes it great is the exaggeration of anatomy and using shapes to express a character's personality, right? So you have the grandma is all full of soft shapes. Again, I'm outlining the same areas like the chin. You have this lovely like cheeks, you know, very friendly. Everything is soft, everything is rounded, you know. She has this very sloping, you know, it almost feels like she would move slow, you know, with all these shapes like this, very flowy, very soft. Nothing is very bony. Even like the elbow here, it's very, very rounded. And the anatomy on the hands is very chunky. Again, it's just she's a grandma who loves to bake, or at least whoever this person would be. The fact that you also contrasting, let me remove here. The fact that the Leyendecker is also contrasting big shapes versus the medium shapes where the detail is needed and where the focus is needed. For example, on the face, if you notice that this whole area, it's quite wrinkly and very detailed, and the contrast is very high, but everything else that honestly could be also detailed and contrasty is rather pushed back. So he's really focusing on the face. Again, he's really focusing on here and the hands. And that's all you really wanna... These shapes are very, very nice. All you really want to like pay attention to, because she's looking, and of course because these three areas are very nicely detailed, it brings focus to the action, which is she's cutting the edging of the edges of the pie, right? And then of course you have the kid. Now if you look at the shapes of the kid versus the grandma, the kid tends to be quite... Oh god, that's not a good color at all. I'll do it with blue again, or purple. There you go, purple. Alright. So the kid's shape is actually quite sharp. It's very expressive because he's a kid, right? So we have the shape of the hair. No one really has hair like this, right? It's not realistic. However, he's pushing realism to emphasize the personality of the kid. You have all of these really sharp, like very exciting type of shapes. You know, also it's quite undulating because he's a kid, has his own undulating, these flowy shapes, but all of them have a little bit of a sharp curve, so to speak. So you have the eye, the lips here. It's all just like, it's round shapes with sharp corners, right? And then you have the arm, for example. This arm is dope as fuck. Like, look at this curve here. It's so nice. It's so like, you know. And the more is like, we have more of that on the outside of the arm, just like, bam. And then you have this really sharp curvature to the arm here, and then the arm is resting against the table, and then it goes up again. All of his shapes are like that. It's one thing that you notice. Of course, the proportions, like the kid's proportions, the head, I think it's a little bit exaggerated. The same is with the hands. He tends to exaggerate heads and hands more than anything. He really, really focuses on that, from what I can tell. And so his hands are very expressive. It's honestly the reason why he does it, I would assume it's because it's the two main important things in characters. It's there's so much focus. Us as humans, we recognize faces on everything, in objects, in clouds, in whatever, right? It's such a focal point in our daily lives, and the same is with hands. Even as I'm speaking now, I'm moving my hands, I'm expressing. So these two things are extremely expressive and needed things in our day to day, right? The body, not so much. The body is a supplement to the character, and the character is in the face and in the hands for Leyendecker. So the hair here is really cool too, but it's not a main. It actually, I would say the hair is like a main focal point too. Look how cool that looks. He also uses a lot of dynamic and expressiveness in wrinkles, because wrinkles can be almost anything. You can bullshit wrinkles left and right, and no one will bat an eye or consider that it's wrong for most of the time. He seems like he takes advantage of that really, really a lot. So like this would be another focal point for Leyendecker. Look at this. Look at this. Let's make this darker. Look at it. Look at this shape here. Bam, bam. It's like it's like a wave, you know? He really uses it to express the character. While Grandma, let's go back to Grandma. Grandma does have some let me remove that. Grandma does have some sharp edges, but even her sharp edges are like rounded. It's fitting the character. There's only maybe like one here that's like the edge of the sleeve, but like most of it is rounded. Like all of these folds are swoopy loops. They're just loops, right? Versus the kid, which is a bunch of sharp edges showing energy, right? And I would say that is the main reason why I personally think Leyendecker character design and shapes, just his style is everything is to supplement a narrative. And that's the main thing you need to keep in mind is, what am I doing on purpose? You ask yourself, what am I doing on purpose to supplement the story? How can I make the kid, you know, he's not in an active pose, but how can I still make him look like he would be an energetic kid, you know? How could you make an energetic looking kid while he's sleeping? You know what I mean? Like, just think about those things, because it's quite easy to put an action pose, and then that obviously shows the energy, and it requires a bit more finesse when characters are idle, which by the way is something I personally love. Generally speaking, I love creating like idle characters. I don't know, for example, this image is great. She's just cutting the edge. There's really nothing much to it. It's like she's just cutting the edge of the pie, the dough of the pie, and the kid is looking at her. But the whole thing is so nice to look at, and there's energy to it, to a still moment, you know? So that concludes the reason as to why I personally believe that Leyendecker, the main reasons as to why it's so cool, his shapes.